I really appreciate the effort by you people to start a global journal on Dalit studies. Uh, the problem of Dalit has been now recently in a couple of years has been globalized, and there's a lot of visibility globally. I myself, along with Simon Lawrence, Lawrence Simon from Brandeis University, we started a online journal for last 3 years, and it is being successfully carried on, and there is a huge response to that journal. And this is a similar attempt, and I thought it's a very important asset, so I should be a part of it. So let me appreciate your effort for undertaking this enterprise. Therefore, I decided to speak on the issues of persistence of caste discrimination in India, and why it is so stubborn, why the discrimination still persists, particularly the economic discrimination. That's the area where I have done some work. Why does the economic discrimination still persist? And if it persists, there must be some motive behind it. The discrimination doesn't persist simply just like that. There is some motive behind it, and there are certain, it serves certain purpose of those who discriminate. Therefore, I decided to sort of look into the motive behind discrimination, which make it a sort of a very stubborn kind of institution. And I thought I should not touch upon the empirical evidence. There is a lot of empirical evidence on economic discrimination and social discrimination. I have brought it out in a number of my books. But I thought I must share with you my understanding of what do we get, what insight we get on persistence of discrimination, caste discrimination from the theories, so that we can then relate to empirical facts. So I will not talk about empirical fact. I will take it for granted that there is enough evidence of discrimination, massive evidence as such of discrimination, but the area which remain relatively unexplored, or to some extent not very rigorously explored, is the reason why discrimination persists, what are the motive, what purpose is served of those who discriminate. That is what I will do, and what are the lessons from the theory. Now, I will do this in two parts very quickly. First part will be the theories of economic discrimination developed in USA particularly, and in Europe, and what this theory have to say as far as the motive behind discrimination and reason for persistence of discrimination. And then quickly switch over to the caste briefly. And I think with that, I would like to end. I won't go to the empirical aspect of it. Now, as all of you know, you are familiar that the Gary Baker was the first sort of economic sociologist or sociological economist who first developed a theory of economic discrimination, rather a theory of market discrimination, in the mid-50s. And that was sort of a beginning of the research on discrimination, where he in a way combined sociology with economics. And then there is a series of economists began to write, sociology began to write on economic discrimination in market and non-market institutions. We begin with Baker, and then you have Arrows, independent theoretical stand. Then, of course, Akraloff has done a lot of work. Akraloff and Cantum has brought a book called Identity and Economics, Identity Economics. And then there are several African-American writers who developed some theoretical understanding on this. Most prominent is, of course, William Darity from Duke, who has recently brought out a book on reparation. So I will cover these 3-4 strands very quickly, and then switch over to the Indian situation, caste. And in caste, again, we have to all depend on the writing coming from USA. Akraloff and Scowley and Deepak Lal are the 3 of them to come to my mind who have written on from a theoretical point of view. But all of them are from USA again. Deepak Lal is Indian, but he spent most of his time in USA and UK. I'm mentioning this simply because there has been a lack of interest in Indian economists to try to understand through theory the phenomena of caste economic discrimination as such. It's very sad. It speaks on the scholarship of Indian economics as such. How the study on discrimination itself became an issue of exclusion and denial. But there I will basically then touch upon Dr. Ambedkar, who has very voluminously written on the caste and gave the theoretical dimension to it. Now, beginning with the what we get from what insight we get from the USA, from Baker, from Arrow, from Akraloff, and from William Darity and company. Very briefly, so we can take in answer question if possible. Baker was the first one to argue that people enjoy discrimination in the market. They have a taste for discrimination. And they have a taste for discrimination simply because they derive utility from discriminating other people. Discrimination essentially means they're treating equal unequally and denying equal rights. So, and that itself became the cause of the concern. We are concerned about discrimination not simply because it denies equal opportunity and right to the certain groups, but its consequences are into lack of resources, lack of employment, education, and ultimately low income and poverty. That is why, as an economist, we are concerned. So Baker would argue that people enjoy a taste for discrimination and they derive utility out of discrimination. He doesn't measure that into economic term, but they derive that utility. They maximize their utility. So in a simple word, he's talking about that one particular group generally discriminate against the other particular group, a white vis-a-vis black or male vis-a-vis woman, because they enjoy satisfaction and utility from it. There are other aspects of this theory which I'll take later. So it is called a test theory. Now, Arrow later on in early 70s, after say 20 years or 15 years, came with a theory which we call it a belief theory. Arrow also agreed that the enterprises and entrepreneurs do discriminate, but they don't have intention to discriminate. Their action result into discrimination not knowing. Now, what is the central point of the belief theory? The central point is that it is also called an imperfect information theory. The competitive market economy decision making is based on the assumption that you have perfect knowledge. If you want to hire a worker, you will take the best one whose marginal productivity or productivity is very high. But to be able to select those who are best, you have to have information to buy data and to other things. Now, since you don't have perfect information, you are faced with the imperfect information. So you take your decision based on the imperfect information. And therein, one point comes in that you believe that certain groups are more productive vis-a-vis the other, and certain groups are less productive. Say, for example, black in USA or female in everywhere. The entrepreneurs, when they want to hire and make the payment in terms of wages, these economic decisions are then are based on the belief about the productivity of a worker. Intention is not to discriminate, but it results into discrimination simply because their decisions are based on certain stereotype and belief, and it results into discrimination. You may consider that black are less productive, and therefore you don't hire them. You hire white. It is quite likely that the white person that you hire may be less productive than the black which you have denied, and it results into discrimination. So there are variants also of this. Generally, there is a bias that the poor and marginalized groups are less productive than those who are economically better off. So there are variations of this argument which has been developed by many others later on. So this is a belief theory which also result into discrimination, but it gives the causes of discrimination, that imperfect information and the belief of entrepreneurs of some group being less efficient than others is the source of discrimination. The intention is not discrimination as such, but it results into discrimination. But the motive is economics, because in hiring, the entrepreneur look for the people who are more productive. So the intention is economics. So there is a difference between Baker and Arrow, that Arrow hit on the economic interest behind discrimination in a way, indirectly, while Baker only talk in terms of utility. Then there are identity theories, series of identity theories which have been developed in 80s and 2000, particularly 2000. So you will see that there are a couple of articles into 2000 and earlier to that by Akrylov and his colleague Cantum, and they developed the theory based around identity. Their continuous writing and more volume of writing result into a book called Identity Economics, Discrimination in Wages, Employment, and Poverty. So this book came in 2010. Now this is almost a parallel to Becker, as a matter of fact. Now, what is the central argument of this? I'm trying to give you this background quickly, simply because I want to relate it to the caste issue. The Akrylov argument is that there are three entities in the society. One is that in a society there are social categories, social groups, and each of the group have their norms. They fix the norm of behaving with others in the market or non-market institutions. So social category, reality of social category, and they are forming norms about others or views about others and how to behave with others. So the behavior of one particular social category is determined by the norm that they hold about the other groups. And ultimately, the simple meaning of identity theory is that those norms are discriminatory vis-a-vis other groups. And as a result, it results into discrimination. There are prejudices about the other groups, and the discrimination occurs there. That is the very simple one. But the one of the other point that Akrylov would argue that the discrimination has a social context, as against the Baker, who talk about the individual test. Baker didn't talk about the societal test. Baker talked about the individual test for discrimination. Here, Akrylov extended it to society in a way that there are social group and they have a test. In a way, we can say that they hold the prejudices of discrimination against others. I won't go into great detail. At that period of time, I think William Darity also wrote, his colleague, 2-3 colleagues, and he wrote a theory of discrimination based on identity. Now he goes a step ahead, which is an interesting point. The Akrylov also hit at the economic motive behind discrimination by one community vis-a-vis the other community. And Darity, of course, he emphasized on the economic motive behind discrimination. So his theory is called, identity norms theory, in a way that the norms are developed in a manner such that those norms allow you to discriminate other groups, but there is a clear-cut motive behind this norms that they discriminate. So this is fairly close to Akrylov's argument, but Darity is basically arguing that he talk of 3 scenarios. One is the norm which result into discrimination. The other is the norms which are not discriminatory, only recognize the merit of the person. And that is then sort of a secular or individual identity. Earlier is the discriminating identity. Second is the individual identity. And third, he talked about the mixed identity, where this discrimination also takes place, but also people recognize only the merit. But the crux of the point of William Darity is that the norms are developed in a manner such that they allowed economic gain through discrimination to a one particular group vis-a-vis the other. The important point again in Dalit theory is that when the norms which are discriminatory doesn't yield economic gain to the discriminator, then the discrimination will disappear. Then you sort of switch over to the individual norm. You only recognize merit and don't discriminate. So in a way, then William Dariti's theory is a dynamic theory. It will tell you how discrimination reduces and pushed towards the merit. Yes, yes. Now, these are some of the major points. I don't think there are many other. There are many standpoints about reason for reason for discrimination or theories of discrimination, but these are, I think, the very, very prominent standpoint. There is one general argument and an agreement that in both Becker's case, Arrow's case, and even in case of Akrolov identity theory, at the foundation of discrimination is prejudice. You discriminate others in Becker's theory because you are prejudiced against other group. Similarly, in the Arrow's thing, that intention is not to discriminate, but you do believe and you form a belief about certain groups that they are less protected. So there is a prejudice and there is a stereotype about the other groups. And also to a greater extent, identity theory of Akrolov does the same thing, that the one particular social category form a norm in a manner such that it discriminates, exclude, and isolate other groups for no reason. And there is a prejudice there against the other group. Now, social psychologists, in USA, psychologists have examined the prejudice, the foundation of prejudice for the discrimination as such. Very interesting, the nature of prejudice, the book brought out by a very eminent psychologist from Harvard in mid-50s again. I don't remember the Bloomer, I think. No, I don't remember the name. No, he argues that the prejudice, yes, he took the prejudice for granted, which resulted into discrimination, but he argued that prejudice is an individual phenomenon. You are prejudiced against another person and result into discrimination. So it is an individualized psychological trait of a man. Now, Bloomer, I think in 1958, a very powerful article by Bloomer, argued that no, the prejudice, which is the basis of the discrimination, is not individual's psychological phenomena. It is a group phenomena. The group as a whole harbored certain prejudice and stereotype against the other group. So it is the group consciousness of prejudice which results into discrimination and not the individual one. But Bloomer brought more clarity again on this. He also considered that the prejudice is by the majority against the minority, or dominant group is against the subordinate group. So dominant group hold and prejudice against the subordinate group. Then he go further and say that the dominant group sort of consider that they have certain propriety right vis-a-vis the subordinate group. They think that they have a property right, an extra right, economic and social and others do not have. And as a result, they discriminate, they dominate. The third point Bloomer makes is very important, is that discrimination persists and occur continuously simply because the group prejudice and group being a group consciousness, it results into discrimination, denial of equal right to other, and you benefit out of it economically and otherwise. So it is the benefit which is at the core of discrimination. So you cannot say that prejudice is only a psychological phenomenon. No, it is a prejudice about other, but the motive behind it is an economic motive, and there is a continuous discrimination and hostile action on the part of the dominant group simply because they constantly fear that their privilege will be taken away by the minority group who are discriminated. Because the minority group who discriminate, they generally have a tendency to organize in one or other form. So these are very important characteristics that discrimination happen between dominant and subordinate group. Dominant group alienate the subordinate group. Dominant group thinks that they have special right, property right, and others do not have. And in order to preserve those property right, they continue to deny the right to the subordinate group, and discrimination persists. So this is, I think, the group consciousness of discrimination is a very important point which the Bloomer has pointed out. So now this is what we get from the Western theory as far as the discrimination is concerned. So broadly speaking, the motive behind discrimination is, in Becker's view, is psychological satisfaction, but in rest of the people's is that it is economic motive. And Becker, in fact, he argues that in order to derive a psychological satisfaction through discrimination, people are prepared to incur losses. For example, he would argue that a white entrepreneur will hire a white worker even if he's less productive compared to the black worker. And so in the process, he is losing a certain income. But he preferred to lose that simply because he derived an additional utility by showing a preference for a people of his own color or identity. But rest of the generally the identity theory and Dalit and the social psychologist Atwell, I think his name is Atwell possibly, the Harvard psychologist, is that the motive is materialistic. Dalit will go a step ahead that yes, the discrimination and considering yourself to be superior vis-a-vis the other brings you some social status and psychological satisfaction, and you derive certain advantages. Those advantages also, in the view of Dalit, result into economic benefit. So the message that we get, and which I got when I review this literature, is that there is a definite material motive in discrimination which involve denial of equal right to the equal people, other people. So you treat equal people unequally. Now let me come to the caste. Now, what Akraloff and Scoveley and Deepak Lal did was very simple. They did not diagnose the economics of caste system in greater detail. They took the feature of the caste system as it is. And then they say that caste is based on allocation of the occupation and economic property right, and they are fixed, they are not to be changed. And then they derive from that that it results into imperfection in the labor market, segmented labor market, and it results into a low productivity. That is the major message of Akraloff. And Scoveley is, of course, talking of division of labor, one group serving the need of the other. And so it's a structural distribution of occupation, and each group serves the purpose of others. So there is an internal yield stability. That is the argument that he will take. He doesn't emphasize more or doesn't bring out the exploitative aspect of this occupational distribution, which is unequal. The Deepak Lal, of course, examined the situation in ancient India, but the theoretical base that he used was Akraloff theory. So we do not get much analysis of the caste system, economic analysis of the caste system. It is only Ambedkar, I think, who wrote very voluminously, not with the purpose of developing a theory as such. He has a theory, which he developed when he was a student at Columbia University. But on the economic aspect of it, we have to gather this information and then sort of try to understand what is his view. Now, to put it very briefly and in summary form, my understanding of Ambedkar views and in general of caste, economics of caste is the following. That the caste divide people into groups called caste. And very popular thing is into 5 castes, the Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, and the untouchable at the bottom. It not only divide people, but isolated through the institution of endogamy, a marriage within the caste, and then as a result, the group would get solidified. But in the economic sphere, it argued that it also allocate the economic right of each of the caste. So in simple term, it allocate the occupation, but basically economic right of each of the caste. The occupations are fixed; they are not supposed to be changed, theoretically speaking, in Manusmriti and other Smriti, and so they remain hereditary occupation. Now, this allocation of the economic right and entitlement of economic right is unequal. There are many of them who have talked about this inequality, economic inequality in caste system in allocation of occupation. But Dr. Ambedkar really brought out the graded aspect of inequality. Domo, of course, talk about hierarchical later on, but I think if you want to understand the real meaning of the hierarchical arrangement, and Dr. Ambedkar used the graded inequality as such, that the allocation of economic right is not only unequal, but it is also graded in the sense that the high caste have more and low caste have less. And as you go down in the caste hierarchy from Brahmin to Kshatriya, Kshatriya to Vaishya, and Vaishya to Shudra, and Shudra to untouchable, the economic right get reduced. That is the main meaning of the graded economic inequality. The same thing happens in social right also, religious right also, cultural right also, but I am not touching that. And the untouchable, who are at the bottom of the caste hierarchy have no rights, economic right whatsoever, except to serve the caste above them. It's very, very clear in Manusmriti, and I have written in some of the papers. Their job is only to serve the high caste, and they survive on whatever they get. There has been a change over a period of time, but I am talking of the formal theoretical position. As far as the Dalit and untouchable are concerned, there is an additional dimension to it. That the untouchable are also not only denied equal rights, so there is a discrimination, but the denial of equal right is the problem of all the castes except the Brahmin. In the Manusmriti, the Brahmins have all the rights, everything in the universe. But Kshatriya lose certain rights. Yes, if you go down, Vaishya are denied certain right, and if you go down, Shudras are denied. So discrimination is the inherent part of the caste system. But as far as the untouchable is concerned, that they not only suffer from denial of right, and they are without any right, any property, but they are also considered impure and polluting caste. That is the difference between the Shudra and the untouchable, as a matter of fact. So untouchables are by birth are considered polluting, and the social association with them make the high caste impure, and therefore this result into what we call social segregation and physical segregation, because the impurity of the untouchable result into social segregation and physical segregation, and therefore we call that they are not to be touched. But it doesn't stop untouchability. It doesn't stop at untouchability also. That is not to be served, but not to be approached also. That high caste should not go in the reasonable distance of the untouchable. Also, unseeability. It is inauspicious to see the untouchable at certain time in a day. So the discrimination is of such a wretched nature in case of untouchable that they are in fact much less than human. They are not human being in a way, as a matter of fact. So the denial of economic right plus the untouchability, because they being considered polluting, make their situation so bad and vulnerable that they really land into a very precarious situation, and that is why there is no comparison of untouchable with similar group in the world, perhaps. Well, this is what Dr. Ambedkar has basically argued. Now, to derive certain point out of this description of the caste, there are 3 essays of Dr. Ambedkar in volume 3, the writing of Dr. Ambedkar, Philosophy of Hinduism, Essential Feature of Hindu Social Order and Unique Feature of Hindu Social Order. So there you get the kind of interpretation, and you see a theoretical perspective of Dr. Ambedkar, that that the the other theories, Becker, identity and belief theory, indirectly uh, talk about discrimination and the economic motive. So they have to build up logic and argument to prove that the motive is economics, and it involved discrimination involved economic motive. Now, Dr. Ambedkar argued that here it is so clear, that you have not to be found out. In fact, it is very clear that in the Shastras, in the Manusmriti, it is written quite clearly that untouchable will not have this right. Untouchable do not have right to own the property. The untouchable do not have right to own land or enter into business, or they are not allowed to take an employment which is a quality employment. Their job is to only serve as a wage laborer and a slave laborer. Now there is a lot of literature on slave laborer. You have to read the book by the historian from Kerala who has brought out the slavery of the untouchable caste for the first time in a most exploitative manner as such. So one of the important points that Dr. Ambedkar is arguing that the other derive indirectly the meaning out of it. In case of caste, it is written clearly. There is no question of argument of discrimination in employment, discrimination in wages, discrimination in denial of ownership of land and enterprise, and many other things. So material motive is certainly there, very, very clearly. There is no doubt about it. The additional point that Dr. Ambedkar brought is that all the point of other theories are found in Dr. Ambedkar's characterization of the caste system, that caste are groups, social category, the way Akrylov will talk. In Baker also there are categories, white and black. In case of Dalit also there are categories. So in caste system there are categories. And there are also norms, and the code are decided there that how one caste should behave with the other caste. And that those norms are such that they are based on unequal assignment of the right, and also their denial of right, which means discrimination. So the discrimination and denial of right is an inherent part of the governing rule of the caste system. You need not labor too much. But the important point that Dr. Ambedkar has brought out is that there is a less foundation and justification of discrimination in religion, in case of other religion. It's not that there is no justification, but Dr. Ambedkar would argue that in Christianity, it is not in so many words. In Islam, it is not in so many words. Or in Buddhism, it is not in so many words. But in Hinduism, the discrimination is an inherent part of the religious ideology, social as well as religious ideology. If you take all the books, you take Manu, you take Narasmuti, then you come to Gita. Gita talk of Varna system, then you go to Ramayana, then you go to Mahabharata, and you pick up any book of Hindu religion, the caste system is mentioned there very, very clearly. So, but the caste system as a social organization is treated as a religious institution. That is the new point that Dr. Ambedkar brought, which the other did not bring. Other talk about the ideological base to discrimination and normative based to discrimination, but Dr. Ambedkar very clearly gave evidence in all those essays that how religion is the foundation of the discrimination in Hinduism and in denial of economic right and social right and cultural right. That's a very important contribution of Dr. Ambedkar. And also prejudice comes in. Of course, there is a prejudice here. And prejudice is with a group consciousness, it is not individual consciousness. All high caste discrimination against the untouchable, irrespective of your rich or poor within the caste. So it is a group consciousness which deny equal right to the untouchable. Now let me summarize, I think, now. And untouchability, of course, make the life of untouchable worse. Not only that socially they are segregated and physically isolated, even today, in all the villages, most of the villages in India, untouchables stay in a segregated locality, particularly the sanitation worker. The the result of this discrimination is in lack of income earning asset, lack of education, and ultimately it results into a forced labor, slave-like labor, low income and poverty. So there is a huge, strong connection between the discrimination and poverty. I have published a book, published an article in EPW about 3-4 months before, I think, employment, wage and occupation discrimination and its impact on income and poverty. For the first time, we and Madheshwaran and our other colleague, Vani, we have established statistically the relationship between the discrimination in employment, wages and occupation with income and thereby in poverty, and how poverty is more because of discrimination. We have estimated, I think, for the recent year, the discrimination result into increase in the poverty by about 4 to 5%, some millions. So the discrimination is so powerful in Hindu caste system because it's a foundation of the caste system, and it results into the poverty and discrimination. Now, to summarize all this, I think the foundation, the motive behind discrimination is the material gain and also the social gain. But social gain also indirectly result into the economic advantages. And it is therefore, this is the reason, it is not psychological satisfaction from discrimination that our group is being superior than theirs. The underneath is the material benefit that the discriminator derive from discrimination, and as a result, those who discriminate, it may be high caste, it may be white, it may be male, it may be other group, they resist elimination of discrimination simply because they tend to lose the material advantages. So this is, I think, broadly speaking, I wanted to share with you. There are then messages of these theories in terms of policies. I'll only mention 5-6 minutes. What are the policy implications of each of the theories? Baker would argue that the discrimination is possible even after test type. Test is discrimination is possible in a situation of market where it is imperfect. Monopolistic market, oligopolistic market, there are only 8 producers, so they can decide whom to hire and whom not to hire. So imperfection in the labor market or other market allow the discrimination to persist. And therefore, he said that if you develop competitive markets, people compete with each other, then the discrimination will disappear. Because in a competitive market, people knows the prices. Say vegetable market, if you go to a vegetable market and if a next seller charge more than the other one who is sitting nearby him, nobody will go to him who is charging a higher price. So therefore, the competitive market tend to reduce the discrimination. That was the argument of Baker. But there has been sufficient evidence, which Baker has also recognized later on. If you read his piece that he wrote for Encyclopedia, he recognized that no, discrimination persists even in a capitalist economy. In a highly competitive economy, discrimination persists, which means the roots of discrimination lie somewhere else. And that is in the material. Arrow's theory would tell that since imperfect information about the productivity, less information about the productivity of minority is the reason, indirect reason for the discrimination, make the information perfect about the productivity of blacks vis-a-vis the whites, and then the entrepreneurs will only hire those black and white who are efficient. So his policy solution is that there should be as much information about the productivity, about the job, and the discrimination will be reduced. That's my reading of Arrow's policy implication. As far as the Akraloff is concerned, he is arguing slightly. He also argues that yes, discrimination has a material basis, so there should be policies of affirmative action which will give the equal opportunity to the meritorious people. Market will not. He took a very clear stand. Competitive market itself will not reduce the discrimination. You have to have a policies because discrimination still persists. There he argued attitude, ideas, ideology play the role. And therefore, you have to deal with the ideas and ideology. And he has given the example of and social movement by the minorities. He has given the example of the success story of the American woman who launched a gender movement, a feministic movement, and derived so many benefits, enactment of law against gender discrimination, establishment of various organizations, and many other things. That was the result of the social movement and not of the market, not even of the affirmative action policy for women, but because of their social movement. So his policy will be that affirmative action plus the social mobilization among the discriminated group. Directly, of course, will certainly argue for all the programs that are necessary, economic program for the discriminated group. And recently in his book on Way, it has become a very, very, he argued for a reparation, compensation for the denial of equal right, particularly underpayment of wages, and how wide benefit for 400 years. And so there is a case for a reparation beside the affirmative action policy. Ambedkar's solution of the caste is also of a similar type. I think Ambedkar did indirectly talk about reparation. The reparation in case of Ambedkar comes in this way, that the argument for reparation is compensation is that you benefit at the cost of others. I benefit at the cost of your cost. So you lose, I gain. Your loss is my gain. And therefore you should pay back. Your gain is a very unreasonable gain. So therefore you have to pay back. You hit my car and damage my car, you pay the compensation. You are also doing the same thing here. So I think there is a case of reparation, denial of land, denial of entrepreneurship, denial of employment for years together. But also my argument is that the reparation and compensation will take care of the denial of right in the past. You are landless today because denial of land right in the past. It happened in Punjab, for example. There was a law that untouchable were not allowed to buy the land, which was passed in 1901, and it continued up to 1940. It is only in 1946 that law was repealed and untouchables were allowed the land right. And therefore, you will find that although poverty is the lower poverty in Punjab, but the highest percentage of landless among the scheduled castes is in Punjab and not in other states. So I think the reparation takes care of past denial, but discrimination continue in the present, in employment, in wages, in education, in many other areas. So you require a safeguard, legal safeguard against the present discrimination. So I would argue that affirmative action policy to provide safeguard against discrimination in the present, and legal and also legal protection, law against discrimination. We have law against untouchability, but also the one-time solution to give the compensation in the form of land or in the form of money or in the form of Malaysia, for example, the share capital is share are purchased for the Malayas and they get capital gain. So both policies are, of course, I think necessary. That is to compensate for the past lost and also to provide safeguard against the present discrimination which goes on continuously in market and non-market institution. Well, I think I should stop it here, and so we can discuss it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Thorat, for this insightful and intellectually stimulating address. Now, if you would permit, we could take some questions, and I request the participants to raise their hands and we shall take their questions. You may also post your questions in our chat box. Please kindly introduce yourself when you ask your question. Dorna sir, please go ahead.
Thank you, Rupji. It's great to have you here, Professor Sukhadeo Thorat. You have covered a lot in a short period of time. I think you have given a lot of theoretical context to the problems that Dalit untouchability and discrimination has. I have many comments and inquisitiveness to inquire, but because of time, maybe I'll take a couple of things. First of all, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Dhruvanarasali. I'm originally from Nepal, from a Dalit community. I was in the government sector. I was up to the level of senior scientist in Nepal before I came to Canada. In Canada, it's been already more than 20 years. I'm right now adjunct professor at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, and also director of public health in the government side. And with some of the colleagues with me, in 2003, we started one international network. It's called Nepal Dalit Info. It gathers a lot of dialogue and a lot of information. We have a lot of websites which are recognized by American universities, and they're in their library website as well. And we do have a website to disseminate information about Dalit issues. Your presentation has a lot of learning for us. At the end of the day, basically everything boils down to material and social deprivations, which is actually consistent with many of your discussion of various theories, I think. At the same time, Ambedkar's theory of this religious integral part of the discrimination is an integral part of the Hindu religion. That is also very much the notion that every one of us have agreed upon. That is in the contemporary world, this religious practices are on everyday life that is always impacting on people's life, resulting in discrimination. That is always true. That's what I think. One of the things I was just wondering, in Indian literature and many of the articles coming out of India, and yourself also, you mentioned 5 groups of castes, 5 caste groups. But in Nepal, we always thought scriptures, religious scriptures always consider only 4 groups, and Dalits, who are untouchables, they're all part of Sudra. Why this difference? Why this information is different, and why this categorization happened in India? That even Western, usually Western media or Western literature, they always rely on Indian literature, and they, when they cite any examples of Dalit issues, finally in the even the news lines, at the bottom of the line, they will write one sentence: untouchables are outside the Hindu caste system. That's how they write. Why this information is happening, and we always thought in Nepal that untouchable, whoever were considered as untouchable because of the social norms, or by, especially in Nepal, actually there was one prime minister who promulgated a law. The untouchability was actually constituted in the law of the land. That's why it is really, it requires reparation and compensation. We have been voicing for that. But this part of the untouchability is one of the practices meted to Sudra. Again, Hindu castes are so many, and there are so many gradations. Among Sudras also, some are touchables and some are untouchables. That's how our notion was. And my question is actually around that. I wanted some clarity on this.
I think you raise a very, very important question. I encountered this question when I'm working on a project called Caste and Slavery. And I encounter a question is that in Manusmriti, which is the major book, and even other Smritis, there are only 4 castes. and there is no fifth caste. Manu clearly say that. But we see that all the disabilities which are mentioned by Manu on the name of Shudra, social segregation, pollution, and all that, are to be found among the untouchable and not the peasant Shudra as such. Peasant Shudras suffer from discrimination to a certain extent, but the untouchability, unapproachability, pollution, concept of pollution and purity is to be found with respect to untouchable. Now the question therefore arises that how come the disability got transferred to untouchables and the Shudra were relieved in a way, if at all they were there? I think there is a literature by some of the Japanese scholars, and even I think historians have done a good work. R.S. Sharma, Shudra in ancient India. And there is a very recent book by Vivekanand Jha, Chandala. Very, very important book. I think this issue is dealt there, and one or two Japanese scholars have studied. What happened is that they are arguing, I will only take a minute, they are arguing that the Shudra, when we talk of four Shudra group and four castes, Manusmriti also talk about the communities outside the caste system. And Chandala was the major community. Chandala is referred in a very, very different text, which are the community outside the caste system, nomadic, and their occupations are very, very odd occupation, and they are considered to be socially segregated, isolated. We do not know when untouchability was imposed on them, but there are theories of untouchability as to when it came. The word asprusha, untouchable, also has appeared in one of the religious books. But the point that I wanted to mention very quickly, you can read and talk, that Shudra got split into Shudra and Ati Shudra. The lower Shudra became a part of the untouchable. And so all those disabilities which are mentioned in Manusmriti for Shudra were only confined to Ati Shudra, which became a part of the untouchable, and of course to the untouchables, all disability. And the other Shudras, which are relatively considered to be clean, they even began to become a cultivator. In Manusmriti, they didn't have a right to land, but they became cultivator. And their status was then different. So by 7th century AD, the Japanese scholar will argue that the untouchable was consolidated and Shudra began to own the land and cultivate, and their social status was slightly improved. So that is the explanation of the historian particularly as to how come all disability which are indicated for Shudra are landed on the untouchable, and Shudra got free from that. But a lower section of Shudra became the part of the untouchable, and all those disabilities that you find are there for them.
We have two questions in the chat box,
yeah,
and I'm going to read them out. The first question is from Devika Lakhote, and she says, there has been recent development of the theory of racial capitalism, which says that capitalism has never existed without white supremacy and is directly tied to slavery. Do you think we can have such a theory in the South Asian context of caste?
Oh yes, there is no doubt about it that there is no example in the world, despite very wretched slavery in USA. There is no example in the world that for about 2,200 years, the untouchables have been only confined to physical labor and exploitative labor. Everybody recognized that the untouchability was from around 200 BC 200 to 200 AD. Dr. Ambedkar will add the birth of untouchability about 400 AD. Now they give me the example of a community who has served such a degraded life, and only as a labor and exploitative labor. And now there is a literature coming up that they were basically considered slave community. Slavery is there in Hinduism, but there is a hierarchical slavery. So untouchable caste as a whole were considered slavery. And if you look at the Sanal Mohan's book, now I remember, read Sanal Mohan's book, Slavery in Kerala. It brings out the very, very pathetic and exploitative nature of the untouchable slave, because the untouchability make it more worse. It is not only economic discrimination, but untouchability make it So very worse. They were all engaged into agriculture, and therefore they are called soil slave, agro slave. So obviously the private production and capitalism and feudalism all were on the labor of the untouchables and massive exploitative wage labor.
Okay. And we have one more question from Subhas Nepaliji, and he says, you cited new classical theories to discuss the causes of the persistence of caste-based discrimination. Do you think that they are adequate to understand the discrimination of market? What are your views on the Minserian concept of unequal investment on the human capital?
Could you repeat the last sentence?
What are your views on the Minserian concept of unequal investment on the human capital?
Which concept? View? Which?
Minserian.
Insurian?
Mincerian.
Yeah, well, I'm not aware about it. But anyway, the neoclassical theories, of course, have their limitation. Obviously, they undermine the exploitative aspect of it. These are all called market-based discrimination. And the exploitative aspect of discrimination is not. But Darity is a Marxist perspective to a greater extent. He's hitting at the economic exploitation as such, directly. Radical sort of theory of discrimination. Yeah.
So another question is from Vivek Kali Kote, and he asks, taking the context of India, where reservation has done a lot, support for mobilization of the lower caste on economic terms is now considered by some sections an excessive policy. What is your stand on this?
Well, it is not excessive policy. It is, in fact, it is very, very meager. See, you take India, for example, the reservation in employment is confined to government sector, which constitute a very small proportion of total employment. And since early 90s, when privatization has increased massively, as you privatize, there is a de-reservation. There is some sort of affirmative action policy by private sector, but it is voluntary and self-regulatory. Nobody knows what is happening. I was involved in that debate, and I was responsible also to have affirmative action policy for private sector. But the very small proportion of the public job and government jobs are counted for reservation. Same is the story with education. Reservation in educational institution, there is a huge privatization of the school education, higher education, where the reservation doesn't apply. So reservation cover a very small portion of the employment for the scheduled caste in India, and I have a feeling for in Nepal also. To say that it is excessive is not appropriate at all. What they require is that you have to develop policies to give them the land, because proportion of landlessness is very high. You have to give them entrepreneurship to increase the ownership of capital, possibly the way Malaysia has done by buying the shares for the Malayas. You have to have endowment fund and scholarship for education purposes, and you have to have policies for the health. So reservation account a very small, very, very small sector. It is not excessive at all.
Okay, there is another question from Professor David Gellner, and he says, in your talk, you seem to be stressing the material incentives for discrimination and opposing that to psychological satisfaction that discrimination might bring. But are these really opposed? Cannot there be mixed motives? In fact, do not the so-called psychic benefits of discrimination apply even those cases where there are no economic benefits?
No, there is a discrimination which derive a psychological satisfaction and from the so-called high status that you enjoy. There is a feeling of that, obviously, and there is no doubt about it. But the major part of it is material. The favoritism shown in employment, in wages, in sale and purchase, in all aspects of the economic life, by the high caste to the people of their own caste, or by male for the male, or by the whites for the whites. That is the predominant aspect of discrimination that cannot be denied. considering yourself to be socially superior and deriving some psychological satisfaction out of it is there. There's no doubt about that. But that vanishes to a greater extent once there is a change in the material condition of the people, untouchable particularly.
Dr. Thorat, thank you so much. I'm pleased to see here, although I have already listened to your lecture in Kathmandu too, we are very much pleased to see you that you are taking interest in the, even in the problem of Dalit. First of all, I would like to give my brief introduction. My name is Om Prakash V.K. Gohatraj. I am involved in Dalit movement since more than 5 decades. Now I'm living in USA, Texas since 1.5 years before. Here, I would like to raise some, I would like to seek your suggestions. I am experiencing some problems. For example, you said there are playing economic role and educational role. For example, lack of education, lack of economic condition, the untouchables are facing the problem. But I see even the educated people in Nepal, they do caste discrimination. For example, some years before, you know, Dr. Baburam Bhattarai, the product of your university, JNU. He had become the prime minister at his ministry of 48 members. He did not include even a single Dalit. Yeah. Now he has become, when he is not in power, now he has become the first spokesperson of Dalit. This is the situation because again, I am confident. I am confident that even if he goes in power again, he will not include even a single Dalit. But when he will not be in power, then he speaks about Dalit and about the empowerment of Dalit, one thing. So I think the education also is not playing so much role in Nepal to uplift Dalit, one thing. And another thing, if I may be a millionaire, I will not get the room in rent even in Kathmandu because of being a Dalit. This is the situation. I'm seeking your suggestion. How could we connect this situation to the way out to remove all these problems in future? We are fighting for for decades to be emancipated from the problem. But even now, we are not getting the tangible result. We are facing in society, even today, we are facing in the society a terrible situation of untouchability. However, we concerned about the top politicians. They are not so sensitive and they are not being so responsible in our problem. You see, some months ago, there happened a Rukum event, but even the top official, okay, I'm going to end it. Even the top politician, they did not speak openly about the Rukum event. Even today, we are looking that the Supreme Court also gave the regressive verdict about this reservation. This is the situation. But they all are intellectuals who are doing discrimination on us. Then what could be our way out to get the solution? I request you to give your good suggestions.
This is a very good question, repeatedly asked. The interrelationship between discrimination and economic status. See, theoretically, one has to understand that discrimination is neutral to your economic standing. The discrimination doesn't have a foundation in economics. Discrimination has a foundation in your ascribed status. Therefore, even if you are economically mobile, you get a good job, good house, and since you are considered by birth as an untouchable, you continue to suffer from discrimination. That is the first point that we have to understand. But the second point is that this doesn't mean that economic mobility and economic development is not necessary, because there is also a connection between economic development of an individual and the propensity to face discrimination. At least the economic policy towards the untouchable bring improvement in their economic life. They get food to eat, their poverty get reduced, malnutrition get reduced, their children get education. So over the generation, then there is a mobility. So the role of economic mobility through reservation and other policies need to be accepted, recognized. But that by itself will remove discrimination, caste discrimination is not there. It may decline, it may become little more sober, but discrimination remains. Therefore, the affirmative action policy, reservation policies are also necessary for those who are economically better off. You may not give them economic concession. You may not. You may ask them to give the same fee as the high caste do, but you cannot extend that argument to the denial of reservation because they also face discrimination. So I think this dual problem has to be recognized. That one of the major consequences of economic discrimination being poverty and low employment, you have to have economic policies to help them. There will be mobility, and their strength to deal with the discrimination issue will also be quite strong. And the propensity to discriminate by others will also get reduced. But it will not be eliminated altogether, because discrimination has a base in ascribed status. That is the one that we have to understand as such. So there is a question here by somebody is asking about humiliation. Yes, of course, there is humiliation. Even the economically better off, they face discrimination and humiliation and derogatory word. So humiliation is there, and humiliation is very, very painful. It hurt you very badly. So we cannot only talk about economics, material aspect of discrimination, but also the social, psychological, and human aspect of discrimination we have to understand. But economic and social caste discrimination connection is fairly clear now. And so therefore, even the economically better off, they must identify the nature of discrimination that they face, and there has to be social movement against them. There has to be legal protection to them. In India, for example, we never thought that there will be discrimination in education institution. People thought, at least. They thought that there won't be discrimination in the health sector. There won't be discrimination in the midday meal scheme. But all studies now bring out that discrimination cut across all the sphere: economic, social, religious, political. So they have to be dealt with. We have to provide them legal and other safeguards so that they have an equal access to the market and non-market institution, education, health, and various schemes.
Thank you very much, Rip. Let me make sure people can hear me, since I have had such a problem with my microphone and my connectivity, and I do apologize for that. I especially want to thank Dr. Thorat and to apologize to him for not being able to introduce him properly at the beginning of the program, but of course Rip stepped in admirably and made up for my own lack. So as you've seen, this is the keynote address for our series of talks on the global dialogue on Dalit studies in South Asia. I think it was an extremely dynamic speech, and I think that it was an even more dynamic conversation that followed, with a lot of interesting takes on Dr. Thorat's talk, and I hope that future presentations in our dialogue will be of a similar nature, that we will also have robust conversation afterwards. This is really the foundation of what we're trying to do here, is to create this global dialogue. And we had a dialogue that was truly global today. We had participants from Japan, South Asia, Europe, and North America. So in that regard, I think it was extremely successful, about 65 people or so. did attend, and I would like to call on all of you when you get your announcement for the next talk to please forward it to your friends and your. As we also mentioned, the series is connected to a journal that we are in the process of launching, the Journal of Dalit Studies, which is intended to do the very same thing that the dialogue is doing. So again, I would like to thank you all for coming and for participating so robustly and energetically in our program. I hope to see you in September at our next speech, and I would like you also to feel free to send us suggestions or nominations for people that you would like to see in our program. And so with that, I'd like everybody to thank Dr. Thorat for his great presentation, and you can indicate either by showing a clap in your reactions or by physically clapping. Thank you very much, Dr. Thorat.